guys, it's Sam, and this is a Q&A. I have not done a Q&A in forever, and I was like, it sounds like a good time for this, or for the end of the year. So I wasn't intending on splitting this up, but I'm actually going to because I got enough questions, I think, in both categories. So I'm going to do all the bookish questions here on this channel, and then I'll post another video before or after, probably after this one, with all of the non-bookish questions. So that's on my other channel. Go and follow me there if you don't already. I have been semi-inconsistent with the content over there because I've just like sort of not forgotten, but some of my hobbies have sort of fallen by the wayside a little bit, but I will be posting a lot of videos there, especially for Vlogmas this year. So if you want all of my Vlogmas content, which I'm gonna try to do the full month, we'll see if that happens, then subscribe over there too, because you're gonna get content in both places. So starting here with all the bookish questions, I asked people on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. So I'll start with the YouTube question. What do you think the biggest changes in reading tastes you have had? Interpreter, choose, time period of question, however you wish. Love your videos, thank you. Biggest change in reading taste. I think if we're talking like sort of beginning of Booktube, let's say, I've talked about this a little bit, but obviously I'm reading way less YA. I think this year I'm gonna have read maybe less than 30% YA, it might be less than that. So I'm reading way less YA. I am still reading a lot of fantasy, and I always did, but it's like predominantly fantasy. Even between this year and last year, I'm reading much more fantasy and sci-fi than I am any romance. For the last few years, I was reading a lot of romance, I've talked about this a number of times, and I was reading a lot of not yet released romance through like NetGalley and such, which means that I wasn't necessarily having a good time because it wasn't super vetted. I just like semi-knowing what I'm getting into. That's why I'm on online spaces talking about books so I can get recommendations. So I just wasn't really having a good time with that. And generally, like, I think where I am with my reading taste has always been my preference, but it took me a while to like sort of narrow it down and be okay with that being my niche. Not that I wasn't okay with it in that sense, but like, I think I tried to read a little more widely there for a while to like mix things up, and I'm like, you know what, I know what I like. So adult fantasy and sci-fi is what I like, with the occasional smattering of a like YA, if it's thematically good for me. So yeah, I would say that was my biggest change in reading taste. I've watched and followed your videos for a while now, thank you. I was hoping to ask if there are any good fairy tale mythology retellings lately, and if you could recommend some. I have talked about it recently, but Juniper and Thorn by Ava Reed is a dark horror retelling of a grim fairy tale, but it's very loosely based. But I really loved this recently, but check my other video, my review, I've already posted it, I'll link it on the screen. It has all the triggers in here because this book is heavy. Then The Witch's Heart by Genevieve, is it Gornichek? Yes. This is a retelling of Norse mythology, and a lot of elements of Norse mythology, and one of my most favorite mythology retellings I've read recently. And those, I would say, are the most recent ones for me. Again, I'm not sure how recently you're talking. Obviously, I've talked about a lot of other ones that are like my Eastern European folklore and mythology ones I talk about all the time, some of those, but yeah, I think if I haven't done a recent video on mythology retellings, maybe I should, but those are the most recent ones that come to mind. Do you feel like social media has influenced how you interact with books, approach reading? Totally. I read more because of social media these days, not because of a pressure. People are gonna interpret that as like, oh, you feel pressured to read because of content. Yes and no, but in general, I read more. Like maybe that's a little part of it, but I mostly read more because I have access to all these other books, and like I know what books are coming out and what's good in a way that I never did before I had social media about books. So I know more about new releases, I know about awards, I know about, like, again, I can walk into a bookstore now, and I have been able to do this for years, and even if I haven't read books, know what they're about, especially in like the fantasy section. So I'm just more aware of things because of social media. As far as how I like read, there is definitely like a little bit of, okay, I want to read more. One, because I just want to like get to all the other good books that I know about. And another piece of it is I want to be able to talk about these things online. I want to make content about them. There is also a different way that I read and interact and critique books as a bookish content creator, influencer, reviewer, whatever, than I would if I was just a reader and had no kind of platform. There is a certain amount of responsibility to what you're reading, what you're promoting, that someone that is just reading for fun and not talking to anybody else about the books they're reading. So there are definitely a few books and series that like the authors come out and been openly problematic, and I would have maybe finished the series, like a ongoing series, if I wasn't doing online reviews and stuff and didn't have a platform. But because I do, it's like I'm not gonna talk about that book or that series just because I want to finish it for the characters on my platform. And I also like wouldn't want to, that's I guess part of the like wanting to read enough books or whatever piece that comes in. I also wouldn't want to just read that and then not talk about it, because reading takes time, and I want to be able to talk about that and like that part of my hobby. So it was just easier for me to like not read them at all. But there's been like maybe 2 series that I can think of that were like unfinished, and then something came out about the author that was really horrible, and then I was like, oh, I'm kind of interested in how that story ended, but I'm not going to continue it because of that. And again, all those things I wouldn't know if I was just casually picking up a book in a bookstore. Like, I think, one, if I did find something like that out, like, you can read that with a different, I don't know, you don't have the responsibility of the platform if you read that while not being like a content creator reviewer. And then also, if I didn't have bookish social media, I probably wouldn't even know. So if I would have picked those books up in a store, not followed the authors on Twitter, not followed books Twitter, whatever, I would never know that they didn't mean problematic, and then I also probably would have finished them as well. So yeah, it shapes a lot of things about reading in subtle and non-subtle ways. This is a question I'm probably gonna make a whole video about because I've been planning to for a while. What are your thoughts on Booktube now and how BookTok has seemingly overtaken its reign in popularity within the online bookish realm? What I will say about this now, as far as the BookTok thing, I do want to do a whole video on like the state of Booktube currently and how I feel like it has changed and how, like, yes, it's fallen popularity, although I don't think that it's dying. Obviously, BookTok has taken over as the primary online bookish platform. I did recently do a video on comparing and contrasting Booktube and BookTok, so I'll link that on the screen. But as far as Booktube no longer being like the main platform for people, I think that was inevitably always going to happen. This has happened numerous times. Before Booktube was the biggest one, there was book blogging, and Booktube overcame sort of book blogging. I would say that Booktube and Bookstagram were concurrently popular. I think some people would have said like, oh, Bookstagrammers took over, but I think there was something about the fact that like you couldn't really do videos over there, it was just photos, that it didn't really overtake the long form content talking about book stuff that like book blogs and Booktube did. And the reason Booktube sort of overtook book blogging is because like YouTube is more popular than blog spaces these days, and there's still people that read blogs, there's still people that make blogs, but a lot of people don't want to like read their reviews. They just want to like get a video, have it on in the background, whatever. That's why I started making book content on YouTube, because I think I convey my feelings about something better by talking anyway, and I just found writing reviews to be really tedious and just not my style of communication. And I think a lot of people feel that way, and that's why they make content that way. And a lot of people just want to be able to listen to something and not have to like read something. You get a better sense of who the creator is, things like that. There's pros and cons to both platforms. So I think BookTok is a very obvious next step because short form content is so popular right now. It's not as hard to get into it and make content. It feels a little bit more organic in the way that Booktube used to feel really organic. I think that this is a natural progression, and something was always going to overtake Booktube. I don't think that Booktube is dead, just like blogs have continued to exist for the last 10 years, even though Booktube has been more popular in the realm. Long form content is always going to have a place, and I don't think Booktube is going anywhere. But I do think that there is something different about BookTok, and if anything, I do think BookTok has also reinvigorated a lot of people's content. There's a lot of content that BookTok influences for Booktube, so there's this like symbiotic relationship happening a little bit. And I know that it's been nice for me to still feel really involved in the community and the books community online through BookTok, because a lot of the Booktube creators that I've followed over the years like no longer make content, and I'm not replenishing channels I follow at a high enough rate as people leaving. So like it's hard to stay involved, where BookTok is now where I get my like bookish information in a lot of ways. I also really consolidated my Twitter and don't follow a lot of people that, I don't know, Twitter was just a really toxic space for a while. So I don't get a lot of my information from Twitter either. So BookTok is the place for me because the algorithm is so tailored to you that I don't need to see any crap or anything that I don't want to see or any genres I'm not interested in or anything like that. It's so much easier to find creators and like books that you're interested in through that platform right now. But yes, I'll talk about my feelings on like Booktube as a whole sometime soon, at least at the latest right around Vlogmas. Do you feel pressure to read the same amount of books every year, even if you have less time because of work and life? Not really. I always set my goal as 52 books a year, and I'm always really going to achieve that if I'm at all actively reading. It's like, that's not a hard goal for me to achieve, and so if I achieve that, I'm fine. I don't necessarily feel pressured. Like, it's one of those things that like I know I'm gonna do. If for some reason something happened where like I lost complete interest in reading, that would be fine. That would be sad. But like, I wouldn't be like, I'm not gonna make my 50, it'd be fine. But every year, regardless of what I've been doing, school, work, moving, whatever, I've always managed to hit 52. I usually hit around 70, and that's been kind of like regardless of life stuff. Only when I've been super slumpy have I not hit 70. I think even during my slumps I did hit 70. So like, I'm just generally speaking gonna hit around that amount. Would I be a little bummed if I read less? Sure, but again, not as a like, I need to hit this mark thing, and more like, I wanna read as many good books as possible kind of way. Like that's why I set a reading goal, not so much for like, look how many books I've read, but like, there's so many good books out there that I want to read, and the more that I read during the year, the more that I'll get read, and the more that I'll get to read overall in my life. Book world you'd most like to visit and live in. I say this all the time, but I would die in most like fantasy and sci-fi worlds, so I don't really want to visit or live in any of them. I just looked at my shelves. All of them, I'm like, no. I don't know. I think most like to live in, but I would die in this world too. But I think there were a lot of people that didn't die. Lord of the Rings, maybe for live in. Like I do kind of want to be a hobbit. I want to live in a little hobbit. Or like Rivendell, honestly. I want to be a hobbit or an elf, and I want to be like in the woods or like some cozy house. And I want to be not involved, so maybe Rivendell. I feel like Rivendell's very safe. Nothing bad happened in Rivendell, right? So I feel like I would do that, or like be one of the Ents. Like something like that. Like that's the vibe if I'm gonna live anywhere. And I do think that not everyone got like destroyed, right? So like, I think that's fine. Visit my heart. Oh, wait. Also live in would obviously be the Night Circus, where in Morgenstern. But I guess if I'm not inherently a magical person, that would be the visit one, because I could visit the circus, right? I think that's the best call. What I was gonna say is like, I guess visit like Ravka or something, because then I'll have gone to the Christian world, but no, I think it's very unsafe and I would not do well there, and it's also like a fantasy version of Russia and very cool all the time. So like, do I really want to do that? No. So I would say Night Circus, yeah, and then like live in Lord of the Rings. Are those basic bitch answers? Sure, but they're true. Okay, let's now go to Twitter. What buzzwords would make you instantly pick up a book that most of us wouldn't realize? Oh, buzzwords that you guys don't necessarily think, you wouldn't think about for me? I think you guys would know all of these. Obviously Sentient Forest, you guys know that. Hades and Persephone, you guys know that. And any kind of like Death and the Maiden, you guys know that. Necromancy, you guys know that. What would be one that you guys wouldn't necessarily know? Eldritch Beings-ish, I think you guys know that one too though, because I tend to talk about body horror a lot. I don't know what my buzzwords that you guys don't already know. Vampires, I think you guys know. Like, I love a vampire. Most urban fantasies, I think you guys know that too. I think you guys know me, and that I don't know if there's any buzzwords that like you really wouldn't expect. Maybe some other historical settings that we haven't seen a ton of yet, so you guys wouldn't know, but I don't think you'd necessarily be surprised. There's a Cleopatra and like there's some Mark Antony and Julius Caesar like books coming out like soon-ish. That's kind of a vibe, I'm down with that. What other historical settings? Anything historical Egypt, again, I think you guys know that too. Because like obviously I loved like the David Bod series and like Dead Gin in Cairo and things like that. I think some like Celtic myth stuff would be cool. I don't think any of these are surprising. A lot of like Egyptian queens and stuff. I was the Egypt kid. Like my hyperfixation as a child was Egypt, like totally. Things with the Morrigan would be cool as far as some more Celtic stuff. Yeah, I think you guys know all of these though. Any tips for getting back into reading or recreating a reading habit? I find it hard now that I have to carve out time as an adult versus reading during class back in high school and my focus is shit. I hear you. I think like getting back into reading or recreating a reading habit in general, what I kind of do is sometimes I know that I have to block other things that are time sucks that I don't get a lot of fulfillment out of in order to read. Like for example, TikTok is a time suck. I will stay on it even if I don't really want to. Like earlier today I was on it for a little while and I was like feeling myself getting like annoyed with it and I could not put it down because it's addictive. So I have things like app blockers. So like at 11 p.m. at night, my TikTok, I get locked out of it. I can't go on it anymore. It's another like program that I use. It's called App Block. So that I use, so if you have things that you know that you're doing that you don't really want to do that are kind of mindless, doing something like that to create a barrier so that you can do the things you want to do, like reading. I also kind of just have a rule for myself of like, I want to read 15 minutes a day, period, regardless of what I'm reading, regardless if it's like an audiobook, whatever. I tend to be able to read before bed too, so even if it's just before bed, I'll get that 15 minutes in before bed. Things like that. That's my biggest thing. Also other ways to read like an audiobook, like when you're taking a walk or doing chores or whatever, that can also be really helpful. But it's just a matter of like making the time, and if you truly don't have the time, like not beating yourself up for it, but most of us do have the time. We just need to find it. And then if you're, you know, focus is shit, for example, reading something that's like really easy to read. Maybe it's an old favorite. Maybe it's like a middle grade or a YA book that's like really easy to fly through. Something really fast paced, whatever that means for you, like diving in that way first. If you could only ever read 3 books again for the rest of your life, what would they be and why? I hate that. Probably The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, because it's my favorite. The Winter of the Witch by Katherine Arden, because it's a nice culmination. And honestly, I wouldn't, I don't know. I kind of want to say Akamath, even though I don't love Sarah J. Maas, but it's like, it's so chonky, and there's like a nice slow burn, and there's these like Hades Persephone elements and whatever. So maybe, because a lot of my other books are part of a series in a way that I like either don't necessarily love the finale like I do Winter of the Witch, or like I want to know the next parts. So yeah, if I had to choose like series to keep rereading, I would have different answers there. Besides Winter of the Witch, that would still be on there. But yeah, for actual just like standalone, not even standalone, but like for just books, I think that's what I would choose. Would it really be Akamath? Might also be The Final Empire. But Akamath would give me that romance, you know? I mean, all the books have romance, so I don't need Akamath for the romance part. Yeah, tough call for that 3rd slot. What series do you think you'll start, continue, and finish in the upcoming year, with understanding that mood reading doesn't exactly lend itself to answering? I'll be making whole videos about this beginning of next year, because you guys know how I love New Year's content, about like what do I want to continue, start, and finish. But I'll give you a little teaser here. So continue, probably the Chilling Effect series, whatever the name of this is. I think it's just called Chilling Effect by Valerie Valdez. It's a like space opera sci-fi, very fun. But I can't read them all back to back because they're like pretty fast paced and just like a lot, but I plan on continuing with this. Then wrapping up the Inheritance trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. I'll hopefully have read the 2nd book before the end of this year, and then I can finish the 3rd book next year. And then start. I have to look at my TBR shelf. The Queens of Renthea series, I think that's by Sarah Beth Durst, would be a series to start. I've had the 3rd book on my shelf forever, and I finally got the 1st book in the series. I got sent the 3rd book by a publisher when it first came out, like 5 years ago. And I hadn't ever gotten the 1st book, so now I have it and I can start it. What are you currently reading, and how do you organize your reading schedule? This is being pre-filmed, so while you're watching this, this is not what I'm currently reading, because this was like a month ago when I filmed this. But as I'm filming this, I'm reading Note of the Ninth, but you'll have a review and everything up already for that. What I'm currently reading is some kind of nonfiction book for Nonfiction November. As far as my reading schedule, I kind of just talked about that as if you're talking about that, but as far as picking books to read, that is influenced by mood reading, and I just kind of like, when I'm reading a book, I already kind of know the next book I'm gonna read just based on like vibes, if I want something similar, different, whatever. And then I have a bunch of books that I read for like the yearly reading challenge on the Bibliothecary. The people in the Bibliothecary pick a book for me each month. We have a book for book club that I read for House Salt Book Club each month. And is there anything else? Then there's usually a seasonal read for the Bibliothecary as well, that sometimes like one of the months of that season I will have to read too. So like there's some things that are sort of picked for me ahead of time, and some things that I just choose myself based on vibes. Okay, now going to Instagram. Good witchy magic atmospheric fall read Rex, something new. I don't have anything new, because you guys all know the things that I love. I've already like talked about everything. I think the most recent one would be Juniper and Thorn, which I've like talked about already. That's the one that I just read, but I haven't been keeping up on a lot of new releases lately, so I'm really behind on like out-of-the-box unique reads, because I'm reading a lot of backlists these days a lot of people know about. But I know that it's good, so I'm reading it. Will you be reading the rest of the books in the Greenbone saga? I think I'm at least gonna try Jade War. I'm not sure when. If I'm gonna read it, it'll be early next year. So don't forget about a lot of things that happen in Jade City. The problem is Jade City was disappointing for me and almost put me in a reading slump. So I'm hesitant to pick up Jade War. And people, like on my videos talking about it, some people are like, it gets better, some people are like, it gets worse. Like there's no consensus on the series at all. So it's hard to motivate me to read it, but I will be getting it from the library, trying it out. Hopefully I'll like it more. I want to like it more, I do. What is your TBR like these days? It is not bad, but I think it's in about like the 40 range, I wanna say, based on how many shelves I have. I added a lot of books to it during my birthday month, so you can watch some of the hauls from August. So what I'm thinking, I was actually thinking about this for Christmas, is I generally, like my parents buy me a lot of books for Christmas for presents, and then like friends and stuff do as well. So I'm thinking this year I have a lot of big ticket items I kind of want to just ask my parents for because they're expensive. So I'm gonna ask for those things, and so they're probably not gonna get me many books, if any at all, like maybe a few. Mom likes buying me books, so she might, but like she really shouldn't because the things I'm asking for are like pretty expensive. And then even my friends, I might just ask them actually to buy me witchcraft books, which if you want me to talk about witch stuff, it's on my other channel, and all the Q&A questions about witch shit are gonna be on the other Q&A. But I was thinking I have a lot of witchcraft books that I haven't gotten yet, and so if people want to buy me those, cool, and then that wouldn't add to my physical TBR, because I think that honestly my current TBR could take me really close to my birthday next year. Honestly, at like the rate I read. I mean, again, maybe I'll just have a few for Christmas, but generally speaking, my TBR has books that I like really want. I only have a few books on my wish list that I really want to add to it right now. So yeah, I think that it's good, and I could get it down pretty low before my birthday next year. What book characters remind you of friends or partners you have? I don't feel like I have a lot. Like, again, because I read a lot of fantasy books, it's really hard for me to be like, this reminds me of this person. I don't have that a lot. I do feel like that would happen slightly more when I was reading contemporary, but not even, like, none of my exes remind me of book characters like at all. Also, I have dated some interesting people, but even my most recent ex, long-term ex, you guys would see him on the channel like years ago, I hang out with like normies, right? Like, I don't know, there's nobody that I'm like, oh my god, they remind me so much of this. Ideally, I would love to have a partner that reminded me of some of my like favorite romance people, right? That is the goal and that's the bar, and I will accept nothing less at this point. I will say that some character traits, because of past partners, do give me the ick now a little bit. For example, I've dated a few people who like want to be writers or consider themselves authors or whatever. No one like published or anything. Now it just kind of gives me the ick, because I think I'm very sensible in that like most people are not going to be good writers. Like, not everyone can be a good writer. So then if I love you and like need to be supportive but your shit is bad, like it just gives me the ick now. And like there's something particularly about men that write that like it should be attractive and it's just not. As far as my friends, like I think characteristics about my friends would pop up as extremes in book characters. Like, for example, I have a couple friends that I think if you made them more extreme would be considered like the manic pixie dream girl archetype. But yeah, there's not any characters that I'm like, oh, this like character reminds me so much of this person. It just doesn't happen. Favorite method of reading? Definitely physical books, but I do like a audiobook as well. And I can get down with an ebook if I'm like getting books from my library. But I do like listening to audiobooks on like walks and multitasking and like playing Switch games that I don't need to use my brain for. So I like using audiobooks for that, especially if they're fully casted, or if the narrator's like really good, or there's like music or something that like comes into play. Like right now I'm currently reading through the Anita Blake books, and those all have like a soundtrack like in the back. Like if there's a fight scene, like there's sound and whatever, and that's kind of fun. But my preference will always be physical copies of books. Who is your favorite villain in a book, movie, game? Favorite book villain is gonna be the Darkling, like forever. Favorite movie villain? I mean, these are basic answers, but like something is very iconic about Heath Ledger's Joker in Batman. Jared Leto's Joker can choke the worst. Game villain. I've been playing so many cozy games lately where there's like no villains. Ooh, classic. Sephiroth from Final Fantasy VII. I also think the villains and like the gods in the newest God of War, I mean all the God of Wars, because they have the Greek gods are in the earlier ones, but the newest God of War with the Norse gods is really good. Oh, also, how could I forget? Did you guys see that I had a lapse in judgment? All of the villains in Mass Effect, obviously. I don't like, Saren's fine. The Reapers in general in Mass Effect, iconic. And the Elusive Man in Mass Effect, iconic. Even like Dragon Age villains, I don't like. Corypheus in Dragon Age, no. The villains into, although the serial killer guy who's like a side quest villain, the worst. Those are the best ones, I think. Those are the most iconic ones, for sure. What is your favorite book you've read so far this year? I have a number that I've rated 5 stars this year. The Wolf and the Woodsman by Ava Reid sticks out. That was one of the first ones that I read this year and gave 5 stars, so that sticks out a lot. Iron Widow by Siren J. Zhao sticks out. Reading all the David Bod books. Yeah, there's a number of them that have been like really good. I've read mostly, I would say, 4 and 5 star books this year, I think. And I think that is it for all of the bookish questions. So I'm going to film all of the non-bookish questions now. So again, my other channel is linked down below. Check it out for, I will be talking about tattoos, travel, witchcraft stuff, job stuff, love advice stuff. There's a lot of questions that are general over there. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye.